He bets $500. I decide to jam it all in, creating a $4,000 pot if he actually makes the call here, which he does make the snap call. The river is the 8 of hearts, creating a 4-card straight on the board, and I am just holding my breath at this point. He slowly starts to flip over his cards, and he proudly shows All right, let's get into it. Round Rock, Texas, just outside of Austin. We're playing a 1-3 no limit hold'em game. Maximum buy-in $600. A bit deceiving because it is a match the stack game, but we are starting a brand new game, so I'm in for $600 when Ludo, a good friend of mine, opens it up for $10. In early position, middle position player calls, and we 3-bet to $55 with pocket queens in the hijack. Big blind calls, Ludo calls, and we end up going 3 ways to a flop of 7, 8, 9 with 2 diamonds. The player in the small blind leads right out for $70. Ludo makes the fold in between. She's not very deep, so I just decide to peel one off here, waiting for a safe turn card to get it in on the turn. However, the turn comes to 10, putting a 4-card straight on the board. Basically a terrible card for our hand. So when she jams $300, I just decide to make the fold here. I don't think that she's going to have too many worse hands here, and I don't think she's going to be bluffing in this spot. So when I make the fold, she flips over 8, 6 of hearts for the turn straight. She actually thought that she flopped a straight, proudly saying that she had flopped a straight. So it's interesting, even though she was actually bluffing on the flop, she didn't think that she was bluffing. At any rate, it gives me a signal that there's not going to be a lot of folding pre-flop. So I'm anticipating having to get a lot of money in the middle with marginal hands. So that actually happens in the next hand when early position makes it 15 and I call next to act with pocket 10s. Player 2 to my left makes it $65 and it folds back to me. Looking at his stack, it looks like he only has around $500. So rather than just call, I decide to take a stand here and try to get these active Texas players to put a lot of money in with a worse hand. So I make it $250. He ends up jamming and I quickly make the call, but my read was way off. He had pocket aces. Things were definitely not going well right off the bat. So I decided to take a break and pick up the camera and do a quick intro to the vlog. All right, what's up guys? We are firing it up at the Lodge poker room right now. There's a lot of tables going on back here and I'm already stuck $1,500 in less than 2 hours. I lost a bomb pot, which is obviously a double board bomb pot. They're doing that on every delay change. I don't know, just lost every hand. So we're gonna get on the regrind. Even though it's a 1-3 game, I think that I'm gonna have the opportunity to make that money back today. So I'm gonna hop back in there and try to mix it up and get back in the win column. All right, back to the tables, and a couple hours in, we limp in from the small blind with queen jack offsuit. Flop comes queen 8-5 with 2 spades. I decide to lead out for $15, 4-way action. I get 2 callers. The turn is the 6 of clubs, and I continue for $50. Only the button calls, and the river is the ace of hearts. Not a great card for me to get value with. If he had the ace high club draw, he made a pair of aces on the river. If he had the ace high spade draw, he also made a pair. So I just decided to check this one over, and he ends up checking it back, so we take down a small little pot to get us going back in the right direction. This is the first hand I won today. Is that right? Early position makes it 15. There's 1 caller before me, and I call with pocket 8s. Player on my left calls, and we go 4 ways to a flop of queen, queen, jack with 2 hearts. It checks to me, and I get the general idea that the guy on my left is going to be checking as well. So I decide to throw out a small bet of $25 here. Player on my left does in fact fold, and the original raiser calls, and then the guy on my immediate right also calls. So we go 3 ways to a beautiful turn card. It's the 8 giving us a full house, definitely unexpected. And it's also kind of a great card because if someone has 9-10, then they get there with the straight. Obviously, we would have that be with a full house. So when the player in the middle thinks about it and leads for $125, I decide to make the call here, hoping that the player out of position decides to continue as well, but he ends up making the fold. Now we're heads up to a river. The river is another 8, and we make quads. Now the player on my right bets $225, leaving himself with another $250. So he's put most of his money in the pot already. I'm just hoping that he feels like he can't fold his straight here. And I jam it all in, and he thinks about it for quite a long while before making the call. Actually have no idea what he ended up calling with, but I doubt it was a queen. I think a queen would have been a snap call here. Under the gun player limps. Under the gun 1 makes it $20. And I make it 50 next to act with pocket 10s, the button calls, and the original razor calls. And the flop comes down, ace, king, 5 with 2 spades. I decide to check this one over to the button 3-handed, and he bets out 100 into 150. Player out of position folds, and I just decide to let this one go with the 2 overcards on the flop. And he proudly shows us deuce 7 suited. So he's calling 3 bets with deuce 7 suited, proudly showing them, laughing, drinking, having a good time. Keep this villain in the forefront of your mind because there are going to be fireworks with him later on. Let's refer to him as Mr. Deuce 7 from here on out. There's a straddle under the gun for $10, and I make it $30 next to act with pocket kings. Mike, who is one of the hosts of the Lodge live stream, is on my left, and he calls. And Jason makes it $175 from the small blind. At this point, I have a little over $2,000 in my stack, and Jason covers me, so we are sitting extremely deep for this 1-3 game. However, we can kind of call this one a 5-10 hand since there was a $10 straddle on here. So we make the call, and Mike on our left folds, so we go heads up to a flop of 8-5 deuce with 2 spades. Jason continues for $225. Interesting spot for me, but I think I'm going to lean towards keeping his bluffs in here, and I just make the call. The turn is the 3 of spades, completing the front door flush, and he now checks. I do have the king of spades in my hand, but I don't want to allow him to realize ace of spades equity here. Definitely want to value bet, so I throw out $400, leaving myself with about $1,000. Jason quickly makes the fold, and we are now rebuilding a little bit, only stuck around $700 after this hand. We're actually at our 3rd table now, about 3.5–4 hours deep into the session, and there are some monster stacks in the game, with the average stack being around $1,500. There's a limp for $10, and I make it 50 in the hijack with ace-8 of clubs. The big blind calls and the straddle calls, and we end up going 3 ways to a flop of 7-7-3 rainbow. I decide to check this one back, and the turn comes a deuce. They check it to me again, and I don't see a ton of value in betting, as I don't think a better hand is going to fold in this spot. But when the river comes in 8, and it checks to me again, this is definitely a spot where we can get value now having top pair, top kicker. So I throw out $100, and the straddler thinks about it for a while and ends up making the call. We show, and he quickly tosses his cards into the muck. In this hand, it's actually 1-3 with no straddle on, and we open it up to $20 with pocket queens. That is actually a pretty standard raise size in this game with these deep stacks. Next to act, Mike on my left makes it 80 and folds back to us. We call. We are sitting about 2,500 deep. I could definitely be 4-betting here, but given that we are so deep, I do not want to inflate a pot with someone who has so many chips and has position on me. So when the flop comes 5-6-7 with 2 clubs, I check and Mike checks it back. The turn is the 5, which is a great card for us, and we lead $125. Mike makes the call, and the river is the 9. Interesting board, as any 8 makes a straight now. So I check it over to him. I don't think he's going to have an 8 very often here, but he definitely could, given that we're so deep. He can be raising pretty wide in these spots. But he quickly checks it back, and I show my hand, and it's good enough to take down this pot as well. We are basically about even at this point, maybe down around $200. When I look down at pocket aces, under the gun, make it $15, folds all the way to the big blind. Doesn't look like we're going to get much action here, and he defends for $15. So we're heads up to a flop of ace-10 deuce with 2 spades. He checks, we c-bet $15, and he now check raises us to $55. This is definitely not something that I expected. When we have 3 of the top cards, he's just not going to have an ace very often here. So basically, he's going to have flush draws so often. A very unique situation when, because of card removal, we get to narrow our opponent down very super narrow with his check raising range. So we make the call, and the turn is the 3 of hearts. Beautiful card. Now we are going to be piling money in on this turn, but unfortunately, he checks now. Definitely not going to let him see a free river card, so we bet on the large size $200. This puts him in a really tough spot because he only had around $700. So if he calls, he already has almost half of his chips in the middle. So rather than call, he decides to do the Texan thing and he does the double check raise and jams it all in. We obviously snap call it off. When I have the effective nuts in this situation, I'm just going to show my hand. So I flip my cards up straight away. The river is the 5 of spades, obviously not the card we were looking for. And then he rolls over the king 4 of spades to get us on the river for the flush, knocking us down to around -1,000 again on the session. And now we move over to the last table. We've already been at 3 other tables. This is the 4th table that we're going to play at now. Mr. Deuce 7 is at this table, mixing it up. He seems a little loosey-goosey, not eating a sandwich, but he's definitely having some drinks.
Woohoo, baby, I love it.
In this hand, Mr. Deuce 7 raises it up to $25 from under the gun. There's a caller in between, and I look down at ace queen of clubs. Definitely want to be isolating him, as I know he's going to be calling very wide, so I make it $125. He makes the call, and we go heads up to a flop of 8-8-4 with 2 hearts. There's definitely some value in betting, but against someone that's this sticky and is never going to fold any piece or any pair, I just decide to check this one back and essentially just never fold versus him. The turn is the 3 of hearts, and he leads for $125. Sticking to the plan of never folding versus this player, I make the call. The river is the 3 of spades, double pairing the board, and he bets again $200. I don't really put much thought into it here, and I quickly make the call. I just have already made up my mind that I'm never folding against this guy. And especially on this board, we have ace high on a double paired board. It's really hard for him to have a value hand here unless he has an overpair. But it turns out that he has 4-5 offsuit, and he just value owned us so hard. Mr. Deuce 7 is definitely getting the best of me right now. So when I look down at Deuce 7, unfortunately, I accidentally press stop recording instead of recording, so I didn't get this on tape, but suffice to say I bluffed it off with 7 deuce against Mr. 7 deuce, just trying to beat him at his own game, and it did not work out for me as I punted off another $500 to him. So at this point we are down around $1,200 again, just not being able to establish any momentum. When I decide to overlimp with pocket 5s and see a flop 5 ways, flop is 7-5 deuce rainbow. Absolutely love it. Not going to be too many draws on this board. So when a player out of position bets, I don't really want to be raising here. There are a few draws on this board. You know, we have 6-4, we have 6-8, we have 3-4. So I just make the call, and the turn is the 9 of hearts, which obviously isn't the best card because if she did have 6-8, she got there on the turn. She bets again, and I don't know. I definitely could be raising, but in these limped pots, there's just not a ton of money in the middle to go after. So I'm just going to call here in position, and I can always dictate on the river if I want to put a lot more chips in. Unfortunately, the river is not a good one. It is another heart, and she bets again. And it's pretty crazy that we flop a set on this dry board, and because of the run out, we basically aren't allowed to raise anymore, and we end up making the call on the river. Luckily, we played our hand the way we did though, because she ended up having 6-8 of hearts for the turn straight and the river flush. Mr. Deuce 7 has been running the table, and it's finally time to clash with him in a massive pot. And the reason why this pot ends up being so big in the first place is because the $20 straddle is on from under the gun. So I look down at ace king offsuit and make it $60 in early position. Folds back to the big blind, Mr. Deuce 7, and he makes the call. And the straddler defends. We go 3 ways to a flop of ace, 4, 7, all clubs. We do not have a club in our hand, but we need to be value betting. We cannot let these Texas players see free cards. So when it checks to me, I see bet $100, and true to form, I get check raised by Mr. Deuce 7 to $325. And as you guys know, I'm never folding against him. If he has flopped a flush here or flopped a set or has aces up, he's just earned it with all of the play that he's done in the past, showing the Deuce 7s, all the bluffs, all of the antagonizing. He's earned it. So I'm not going to be folding here, and I make the call. The turn is the 6 of hearts, and he bets $500. I decide to jam it all in, creating a $4,000 pot if he actually makes the call here, which he does make the snap call. I quickly show my hand, hoping that I have the best hand, but I actually have no idea here. The river is the 8 of hearts, creating a 4-card straight on the board, and I am just holding my breath at this point. He slowly starts to flip over his cards, and he proudly shows the king of clubs and the 3 of spades, allowing us to scoop a 4K pot and get us back into the black. Breathing a sigh of relief. If I would have lost that hand, I would have been down $3,700 or so, but instead now we're up. Absolutely crazy, the variance that happens here in Texas. The flick of a river card is the difference between a $4,000 swing and a 1-3 game. Mr. Deuce 7 has left the building, but the game is still pretty good, and we are about 7 hours deep in the session, finally up in the session. When I open it up for $10 under the gun with pocket queens, button calls, small blind calls, and we go 3 ways to a flop of 7-6-5 with 2 diamonds. I continue for $25 here and only the button calls. The turn is the 4 of diamonds, and that is obviously not a good card for us as an open-ended straight draw gets there and the flush draw gets there. So I check it, and the player on the button bets $100. I actually never consider folding here and make the call. The river is the 7, so this is about the worst board that I could possibly see with my hand, especially after there's been some turn action. So I check, and luckily our opponent checks it back. I show, and our opponent mucks it, and we take down another one. Up around $500 at this point. Early position makes it 15. The cutoff calls, and we call on the button with ace-9 of diamonds. Flop is 9-6-4, 2 spades and a heart. It checks to me, and I bet $25, value betting with our top pair top kicker here. We get 1 caller, and the turn is the 9 of hearts. Absolutely beautiful card, making trips. Checks to me again, and I bet $60. The river is a king, and when it checks to me again, I don't think that I can be going for very big sizing here. I think that our opponent is going to have some pretty weakish hands. He's not going to like the king very often at all. He's going to have a lot of misdraws, so I don't want to bet very big here. I think that it's better to just bet smaller and hope for crying calls, or actually hope for someone to check raise, think that, you know, they can get me off my hand. So I size for $50, a pretty small bet here relative to the pot. And that's exactly what happened. We get a crying call, we show our hand, and it's good enough to take this one down. And after 9 hours, we made close to $1,000. There were so many hands that I did not cover in that 9 hours. So many times where I played absolutely terrible. You know, I did have some drinks, wanted to be able to hang out with people, converse. And I did my best to cover some of the more fun hands. But Texas is absolutely crazy when it comes to poker, so much so that I'm going to be going back. I'm going back on May 10th to Rounders. So if you're in the area, make sure you come out to Rounders. I don't plan on coming back to Texas for at least 5 or 6 months. So this will be the last chance to make it on the vlog and mix it up with me on the Texas Felt. So hopefully I'll see you in Texas, and if I don't see you in Texas, I will see you in a poker room near you.
Hi, I'm Gordon. Thanks for watching, and if you like the action in Texas, make sure you smash that like button.
That is really
Let's fucking go, baby.
You're a natural. You're a natural.
You're gonna be a star.